I'm here in Sardinia where I've been riding KTM's new 890 SMT. Now, if you've been into bikes for a few years, you might remember KTM's 990 SMT. And what that bike was a dressed up version of the 990 SM, which was a fairly basic supermoto, a really raw, uncompromising bike meant for doing skids and wheelies, basically. Or on the other hand, it was a more roadified version of the 990 Adventure, which they sold at the time. She had the same frame, she had the same engine across those three models. And for the new 890 SMT, they've taken a very similar approach. Now, there isn't a pure supermoto model in the current range. So what they've done is take the 890 Adventure R and they've changed the suspension in the first instance. They have given it 50mm less travel front and rear. They've actually made the forks longer over the Adventure bike. That's just to keep the geometry right, because if you'd kept the Adventure bike forks with a 17-inch front wheel rather than 21-inch front tyre as the dirt bikes have, you would end up with a bike on its nose and it would just have horrible handling characteristics. So the SMT has longer forks with less travel. But otherwise, most of the changes are kind of bodywork, they're cosmetic. There's a little bit of adaptation in terms of the way the ABS and traction control works, mostly to sort of compensate for different wheels and tyres rather than any sort of sweeping changes in terms of how sensitive they are or anything like that. But the core of the bike is as per the 890 Adventure R. It's the same frame, absolutely no changes, same engine, again untouched. You could swap one from the other and vice versa and it wouldn't make a difference. Even the brakes are the same. They are the Juan, I think I'm saying that right, Juan. Anyway, those brakes, 320mm discs, and the swing arm's the same as well. There are some differences. The fuel tank is smaller, which is not always a popular move, but KTM decided that it didn't need the kind of big range of the Adventure bike, that it needed to be a little bit more agile, have a different centre of gravity. So where the 890 Adventure has big saddlebag fuel tanks extending right down by the sides of the engine, this has a little bit less of that, although it does have a little bit more at the top, and that's to willfully raise the centre of gravity, because if you're familiar with the Weeble toys, they've got all their weight at the bottom and they never fall down, but they resist falling over. Now you imagine that inverted, you move more weight high up and something's going to flop on its side much easier. So they've gone, maybe not flop on its side in this instance, but they've gone for that same kind of thinking. So moving a little bit weight higher, it will sort of steer from side to side with kind of more natural kind of momentum and its own inertia as you kind of put your weight through the bars. It has its own kind of styling package, its own fairing, different seat. It's more of a supermoto seat, so it's a little bit thinner, it's a slightly flatter profile compared to the 890 Adventure R. So rather than sort of being comfortable for really big miles, it's kind of comfortable for a reasonable amount of miles, but it also gives you the freedom to move around, and that's KTM's thinking with the whole bike. It sacrifices a little bit of the long distance and obviously all of the durability of the bike for a bike that is more fun, more agile, more sporty if you only ever ride on the road and want to attack back roads and mountain passes that little bit harder. It kind of fulfills that brief, as the original did. The original was not a big seller, but it's a real cult bike, and in the comments I've seen people going, oh, why didn't they just do the same as this and blah blah blah, and like the original and so forth. And truth be told, the original was brilliant in lots of ways, but it was also quite flawed. Now the engine it's more characterful than you, and you can't get away from that. But the 990 motor used lots of fuel. It was kind of poor at low RPM. It was quite uncivilized in some ways, and it was all right once you got into the flow, got it up to a sort of certain speed, certain RPM. But in this day and age, that kind of engine, it just doesn't work, because you've got noise, you've got emissions complaints, things like that. And the honest truth of the matter is that the 890 in the new bike actually makes very similar power in real terms, but it's a lot more civilised. It meets all those standards. It can pull from 2000 RPM right at the bottom of the rev range, and it's not coughing and spluttering and juddering, and it'll go through town and it won't do anything untoward as the old bike sometimes did. And that sums up a lot of what the 890 SMT is about, actually. It's the same concept from 15 years or so ago, but modernised and refined and just made that little bit more usable. Although equally it does keep some of the compromises and drawbacks of that original 990. Now, adventure bikes are massive business. They're really popular, and with good reason. You can ride them to work, you can have a bit of fun at a weekend, or you can take your partner away and sort of cross continents and sort of do some big touring miles with them. Whereas the Supermoto Touring, including the new one, the original, obviously they can't do the dirt thing at all unless you're stupid, brave, or both. And the bodywork particularly is a lot slimmer, the seat is smaller, so you lose some of that comfort. It's better than a naked bike, sports bike, something like that, but it's a narrower seat, it's not got as much padding, so after a few hundred miles you're going to be starting to move around, you're going to be shuffling a bit in your seat, you've not got quite the same leg room. It's a compromise, I guess, really, rather than KTM's marketing the touring Supermoto. What it really is a sports tour with long travel suspension. And a sports tour by its very nature, it's a compromise, and the SMT has certain compromises. So in order to give it that kind of back road capability, that moderate aggression that kind of KTM are known for, and that's kind of their signature really, they build bikes with attitude. They have had to compromise on its touring ability. So I've not spent kind of 4 or 5 hours in the saddle straight, so I'm not going to categorically say this bike is super comfy. In honesty, the seat is narrow-ish. I think after a few hours you're going to be moving around, you're going to want to brake, but that's not always a bad thing. Again, it's got a little bit more leg room, it is more comfortable than a naked, something like that. You're going to be able to spend a bit of time on it. You've got bikes like the Tracer 9, and they are really kind of accomplished all-rounders, but next to bikes like the Tracer, you're going to be lacking a little bit of that, and I don't think kind of putting and carrying capability is going to be as good as something like the Tracer, because it's a smaller seat, the pegs are closer, and there's kind of less room for 2 people to sit on the bike in general, because it is still a relative compact bike despite being sort of adventure bike based. There was a remark in the presentation for the bike where they said we're ending boring sports touring, which I see where they're going. It is a bit harsh though, because if you've ridden a recent Tracer 9 GT or any of the models, in fact, they're not a boring bike at all. They're good fun, they're capable, they handle well. There's little to kind of really complain about, and some people kind of think they're the best bike that Yamaha currently makes, but they probably sit right in the middle of the sports touring spectrum. Whereas the KTM is bent a little bit more towards the sporting side of things, which that's going to suit some people. Personally, it suits me. I like bikes with a bit of character, a bit of kind of sporty aggression, and bikes that can handle a back road and a bit of a blast and kind of doing naughty things once in a while. A lot of the riding we've been doing today has been beautiful Sardinian country roads, mountain passes, things like that. And that's where the SMT really excels. It's not been perfectly smooth, but with that kind of longer travel suspension you get compared to something like KTM's own 890 Duke, that allows it to absorb big bumps and ripples and potholes and rocks even in some instances. It can deal with that, but it's fully adjustable cartridge forks and fully adjustable shock. It's still got that support, that quality. So when you start hammering it into turns, loading up on the brakes and giving it a big handful of throttle and carrying a bit of lean angle, it can support you. But equally, you can't ride like that all the time. Up in the mountains, you'd be going along for kind of half an hour and not see another vehicle, stringing curve to curve, and I'm just having a whale of a time on beautiful surfaces with endless corners of all varying speeds, and the bike laps that up. But eventually that road ends and there's a town, there's a motorway, there's boring normality, and that's where it kind of has certain advantages over the 890 Duke in their own range, for example. The 890 SMT engine is the same as the Adventure, which has different cam timing compared to the Duke, and what that means is it has more torque low down, it's more civilised as well, but it sacrifices a little bit at the top end, I think to the tune of around 10 horsepower after sort of 7,500 RPM, something like that. But it means you can ride it in traffic. You can sort of let the engine drop to sort of 2,000 RPM and it's not sort of chugging or running out of power or anything like that. Equally, we've been on some dual carriageways today, and the bike had cruise control enabled. You set the cruise control at decent motorway lick, and it just sits there happily. It's comfortable. There's decent wind protection up to kind of 3 figures. It's a useful bike. I started today in the standard settings, which are kind of bent slightly more towards ride quality and comfort and things like that, but it's a very simple job to adjust this bike. It's not a semi-active system. The manual adjusters, that they can all be done with kind of fingers and hands. There's a big knob to adjust the rear preload, and there's little fiddly clickers on top of the forks. You can just do it as you go. And KTM actually provide, unlike most manufacturers, they provide 3 settings. So there's a standard, comfort and a sport setting. As the day went on, I kind of dialed in some of the sports setting just to sort of tighten up the damping and just give it a bit more control and stop it pitching back and forth as I sort of got more confident with the bike. And it really steps up, and it doesn't take a lot. I think I went 2 or 3 clicks and no more, and it changed its character. It was much sportier and it had loads of feel from the tyres. Most bikes in this category have a sports touring tyre that are meant to do lots of miles and they're really good in the wet, whereas KTM have gone more KTM style. They've chosen a sort of fast road sporty tyre that you could actually do a bit of track day work with, the Michelin Power GP. They've got loads of grip, they've got loads of feel, and actually today that they've really roughed up, and it looks like we've done kind of a couple of track sessions. That probably gives you an indicator of the sort of fun we've had with this bike. I've been wrestling with this all day. Who would buy this? Who would want this? Now, if you're an adventure bike rider, you're probably not going to want this bike because it's not quite as easygoing. It doesn't quite have the touring ability of those bikes. And the same goes for owners of potentially an F900XR, BMW, or the Tracer. This bike isn't quite as friendly and usable in terms of that sort of sensible side of its brief, but it is undoubtedly more agile, it's sportier, it's got a kind of a bit of aggression to it, and for some people that's going to work. Somebody who's riding to work every day, actually, if you live outside a city and you've got a dual carriageway, a bit of a motorway ride in, and you then have to kind of thread through city streets, the SMT will get you through the boring bit, motorway speeds. But then when you get into city streets, it's kind of still narrow, it's quite agile, you've got commanding riding position, and it will sort of pull from low RPM. It's got nice fueling, it doesn't matter which mode you choose. There's sport and street, they've got good throttle response and sort of no snatchiness, none of that kind of nastiness that you sometimes get with modern fly-by-wire fuel injection. It's kind of usable all the way through and punchy. I think if you're looking at this, you possibly already know that this is a sort of bike for you or not. If you are buying a bike in the mind of doing lots of touring miles and carrying a pillion and lots of luggage, I don't think it's the bike for you. But if you're looking for a bike that is fun, you can ride it to work, and you want to go on a trip kind of a few times a year, it will do that quite comfortably as well. It's a good all-round fun bike. I think fun is really why you would buy this over any of its rivals. The SMT is easy to get on with. It's got that kind of venture bike quality where you can just get on it. It's easy going and smooth, but it's also got a sportier edge, and you can really give it some hammer on coming out in the country, and you end up putting a big smile on your face if you want to do stupid skids and wheelies. It's really good at it. Now, my real big issue with the bike is the price. Now, in the UK, it's £12,500, which on paper, it kind of fits roughly with the Tracer 9 GT. But the problem is, when you get the bike delivered to you, it has all the electronic additions enabled, and by that I mean the track riding mode, which also allows you to adjust traction control on the move and other bits and pieces. The quick shifter is enabled. The hardware is already in the bike. It's an internal sensor. You don't need to add anything in terms of different linkages or anything like that. And cruise control as well. It's called the Tech Pack, and all those bits and pieces, they work when you buy the bike. Now, you then ride it, you get the bike ran in, and you click past 1,500 kilometres, which is roughly 900 miles if my mental maths is correct. If it's not, then please feel free to slag me off in the comments. Everything turns off, and that's what they now call demo mode. So you can try these things, and if you like them, you can go back to the dealer, plug your bike into a computer, and somebody taps a few keys, takes your credit card off you, and everything works, which kind of rankles a little bit to me, because you've got everything there, the development work is done, the hard parts are there, and you then have to kind of pay a significant amount more to get it. Now, you can pick and choose what you want. If you only want the quick shifter, it's something like 200 quid. If you just want the track mode, again, it's a few £100s. The whole pack, if you wanted every last piece of technology that KTM offer for this bike, including Bluetooth and motor slip regulation, which is engine braking management and so forth, it comes to £860. And of course, on top of the asking price, that then takes the bike well into the 13s. Some kind of owners of the old 990 SMT have noted it doesn't come with any kind of luggage as standard either. The original 990 came with little, admittedly fairly stupid, soft luggage box things that kind of you could fit a pair of shoes and a pair of trousers in, and not much else. but this comes with nothing. So if you want to spec those on top, you're kind of looking at the thick end of $1,000 to add the racks and the boxes and all that sort of thing. So very quickly, to make this bike into the kind of accomplished, capable, kitted out all-round that it could be, you're looking at serious money. Now, value is a subjective thing, so I'm going to have to leave that to you. But on the face of it, I don't think you get enough in terms of those extra kind of sporting credentials to necessarily justify over the Tracer. But equally, some people will look at the Tracer and go, nope, that's not for me, that's too sensible. And they're going to want something like the KTM where it has that bit of spark and that kind of aggression and that sort of the naughty streak. And if that's what you want, then you'll be over the moon with it. It is at kind of a base level a brilliant bike. It's those kind of subjective matters of price and the use you'll put it to that's going to make the decision for a lot of people. With that said, we will be testing it in the UK, probably with the F900XR, the Tracer, maybe the MV Agusta Turismo Veloce, and seeing where it fits in. Final verdict, it's great fun, quite comfortable, quite friendly and usable, but there's kind of question marks over its price and how it actually compares with its rivals in the real world back to back when we get them back in the UK. So click back to us soon and we'll be giving you the kind of full verdict on how the SMT 890 fits into the sports touring market.